A 14-year-old was murdered over a frozen cup here in New Orleans last Sunday. Compounding this tragedy is the fact that the circumstances, the non-issue which resulted in a homicide, is unsurprising for those of us who are used to this type of behavior. Questions will abound among more reasonable people as to why a 31-year-old man arrested for the crime would sink to shooting a 14-year-old several times for any reason, let alone being the recipient of a watered-down frozen cup, according to the victim's mother. If we pause and rack our brains again as reasonable people, we cannot come up with an acceptable reason why this happened. The reliable narrative, where we point our fingers at imported hate and distant discriminators, will not adequately address the very ugly reality that those I call black zombies or chocolate Klansmen are indeed the undead and have no more regard toward the living in the inner city than their cinematic counterparts in movies like World War Z. We have been overrun and are on the brink of being overturned by this type of mindless, violent individual. I'd like to commend the Reverend Raymond Brown, Ms. Cross, and other pastors and activists who had a press conference recently in the same neighborhood where this murder happened and resolved to continue the work of another recently deceased anti-crime activist, Reverend Raphael, in trying to address and combat these issues in the neighborhoods where they've taken root. It has to come from us. We have to be the ones who excommunicate people who have no more regard for black life or any other life than a vandal, a barbarian, or anybody from the Stone Ages. The facts speak for themselves. A cold cup, a 14-year-old, and a man who, at least chronologically, is an adult, combined to create yet another lethal incident in the inner city of New Orleans. If we cast our eyes toward the national scene, we see that many major urban centers and many intense urban centers in mid-sized and small cities are experiencing the same type of mindless violence. I've always called for and will continue to call for an urban safety movement with at least the evangelical and total commitment that our community has not seen since the civil rights movement of the 1960s. This is the time, because as I always say, if we do not govern ourselves and allow people like this to run wild in our community, rest assured, others will govern us for us. And if you don't like the idea of martial law in theory, I'm sure you won't like the idea of martial law in practice. A 14-year-old was killed over a cold cup. Do we need any more hints about how tragic things have become in our community?